So you want to install Odysseus, the AI self-hosted workspace that was made by PewDiePie, but you don't know how to do it, or you got into an issue with a bug, or for example, maybe you're just starting out in home labbing and you want this to work for your entire household. Well, fear not, because in this video I'm going to explain to you step by step on how to do it from the very beginning till the very end. So without further ado, my name is MatthewNapier and let's get into it.
I just want to dance. 1, 2, 3.
So what you're going to need to do first is you need to figure out what you're going to be hosting on. Now, if you already have a server and you're already ready to go, you can skip this step, which is why we're starting it off first. So you can decide by a variety of things. You can use VMware, you can use VirtualBox, you can use Proxmox, you can use whatever you'd like essentially that is out there to create some form of VM or virtual machine. You also could possibly be self-hosting, not self-hosting, I apologize, and use something like DigitalOcean. So let's pretend now that you've installed one of these three. Now what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to find any sort of Linux preference that you have, for example Debian, which I quite like. Go to their website, download a small installation image. I can pick the type that I want. We can go with AMD 64, and next thing you know, it pops up. I'm good to go. What we can see here as well is once you get that going off and you have VirtualBox installed, then from that point on, you're probably going to see something on similarities like this. Now, it depends on what sort of program you're using. It can vary, especially if, for example, you're using Linux to have a Linux machine. So if you're already using Linux, I kind of expect you to already be knowing how to use Qimo or whatever. Anyways, where you're going to go up is you're going to go at the top, you're going to go to new machine, you're going to do on this computer because you're not going to have this weird IP, only I would. You're going to click next, you're going to choose the installation file, perhaps the disk, things of that nature. You're going to type in the machine name where you're going to want it located, and you're going to be able to choose the disk. I would personally have the disk on a single file. However, if you do have it on multiple files, performance is significantly better. But single file is really nice to be able to move between computers. I would recommend anywhere between 60 to 80 gigabytes to start off because the Odysseus is not large, but the LLMs are, depending on what you get. From that point on, it's going to ask you some questions, for example, the memory. You may have a customized hardware button, which at this point you're going to want to go into it. Make sure you up the processor count, the more the merrier, but don't overkill it. Do some quick YouTube or Google research. I would personally stick to perhaps a 4 and a 4, so then total 16. And for the memory, I would stick anywhere between 4 to 8, maybe honestly depending on what LLMs you're using. If you're just doing it for chilling at home and want to do very basic things, probably 8 would be fine, but on the safe side, do 16 if you can afford it. At that point in time, basically you're going to start making the machine, and it's going to be in here, and it's going to be like, whoa, Matthew here, I know something that I forgot to mention in my video. If you go inside the virtual machine settings, if you already hit finish, or you're still on this page, you need to go into add CD/DVD drive, or something similar that you'll see within VirtualBox or such. Use ISO image file, go to browse, find the ISO file, and then click it, hit OK, and then try to launch your virtual machine at that point in time. If you're using something like EXXI or Proxmox, it's going to be a different setup in the sense of what it looks like, but it's very similar. Now, you have to go through the entire setup process of Debian. So when it asks you for the installation, you have to press enter, you have to go through the screens essentially, and then from that point on, you're looking at something very similar to, for example, my cloud. You'll see something very similar to this, with the exception of all the 5,000 files. From that point on, what you're going to want to do is basically you're going to want to install Docker. Now, first things first, I'm going to be showing this in this machine. We're going to change this over. These are the different projects I've been working on. We're going to go over here, and don't mind me, I'm just going to set this up briefly. Test. Essentially, you're going to click on the terminal right here at the corner, and you're going to be brought to you by the home setting. It's going to look something very similar to this once you actually have it all installed and you open it. If you can't find this, you hit the Show Applications button at the bottom left, and you type in terminal. Depending on the Linux system that you also get, hopefully it's Debian derivative, it will look different. From that point on, you're going to make a folder. You're just going to make a folder called Audi or whatever you want, whatever you like. Making a folder is called mkdir, make directory Audi. You're going to make it. It made it if you don't see an error. Then you're going to change directory into Audi, and now you'll see that we have a weird symbol with /Audi. Now, if we ls, which is list, you'll see we have nothing in there, and that's good. This is from this point on where we can start doing things. What the first thing I would do is sudo apt get the update. Once that finishes and it's good to go, the next one is going to be apt get install. You're going to let that run through. It might ask you a question, for example, like, do you want to install this? Are you sure? You're going to just type Y when it asks you for the letter Y. Just pay attention to it. You'll like it. It looks super cool. It looks like you're doing something. The next thing, though, and why you have to do this is all through this terminal. And by the way, if it starts getting just really messy and the terminal is up, down like this, you just run one command, which is typing clear. Now what you're gonna have to do is this really weird command. It's curl space hyphen lowercase fs capital SL then HTTPS with that weird whatever they call it in school. Can't even remember it right now because I'm terrible at speaking. And then once we have the URL, get.docker.com -o get.docker.sh. Then we have two and symbols, sh, get-docker.sh. Now, once you have this, what's going to happen is it's going to install another program called Docker. Docker is essentially a mini computer within that virtual machine that's, of course, within your computer. The Docker can use everything up in the virtual machine, but it's basically safe in its own little bubble, depending on how it's set up. But the neat part about Docker is that all the default configurations, all the requirements, the dependencies, everything are installed inside of Docker, so you don't have to spend 50 minutes installing every little program. So you install this, and it's going to go in a jiffy. Now, if you can't install it because it says you don't have curl for some reason, and yes, I googled how to install curl just to make sure I wasn't going crazy, you would then type sudo apt get install curl. Which, congratulations, now you have curl. Now, once you install Docker, this is where things get a little bit more fun. From that point on, you're going to go to the Odysseus website, and you're going to find the git clone command, which we can see here. However, depending on your virtual machine and how you're doing these things, you're not going to be able to just copy and paste it over. Right? Watch. I try to copy and paste it. It doesn't work. Instead, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to type it out manually. So I'm going to put it on this other screen here. We're going to do git clone https github.com pewdiepie archdamon /odysseus.git. And that's it. Now it's going to clone into, and now we wait. There, Matthew here again. This just comes naturally, so I forgot this. If you can't install it via git, like for some reason your Debian doesn't come with it, just type sudo apt install git. It's as simple as that. Now we have it cloned into, what we're going to be doing is we're going to go into Odysseus, because if we type ls, we see that it pulled the entire directory of GitHub over. So you don't have to do anything on this website. It's completely blank. You don't have to ever think about it again. What you're going to do is you're going to cd into Odysseus. You can always type like 2 or 3 letters and then press tab to get into the next folder. And from that point on, the documentation states that there is a environment file that has to be edited, if you will, or at least copied over. Now, if you're using it to just work inside this virtual machine, that's completely fine. You don't need to edit anything inside the document. But if you are going to be doing some sort of modification, such as, for example, you want this to be working for your entire internet, if you will, like everywhere, then you're going to have to make some of these changes. So the first thing that you're going to need to make, for example, is by going into, what we're going to do is we're going to type nano.env.example.com. We're going to go into the file, and this is basically the text editor for Linux. You're not able to click or go anywhere like this. You have to use your arrow keys. So if you have arrow keys on your keyboard, good for you. You should. From that point on, though, we're going to hold down on Control and press W. This is basically the search, and you'll see at the bottom. And we're going to type the number 7000. Now, 7000 is the port number that's going to work. This is something that we're going to have to open up in a little bit, but for now it's fine. And what we're going to do is we're going to find this app bind. Now, this app bind has to be different. So we're going to comment it out so it can actually be used. Otherwise, it's going to use 127.0.0.1 the entire time. And we're going to figure out what the IP address is of this machine. So from this point on, what we're going to do is we're going to press the plus sign up here, or open up a new terminal just by pressing this button, or right clicking it and pressing new window. And we're going to type IP space ADDR. Now you're going to see a bunch of nonsense and gibberish, and you're probably not going to understand what any of it is. All you're going to do is you're going to scroll up to the top and look for your address, which is very easy. Look at these numbers here on the left. 1 LO, 2 LO, 3 LO, 4 LO. All you have to worry about is the INET. The first one is going to be your local host, which is the 127 that was originally here in the file. And the second one is going to be your actual internal address. Your internal address is right here, 192.168.78.127. What we can do is right click it and press copy. Go into here, hit the backspace on this, and just right click and paste. And now we have a new app bind. In addition to this, we're going to scroll down a little bit further on the document, and we're going to go to here where it says allowed origins. This is just a double check to make sure that's going to work on this. Now we're going to hit comma, we're going to hit space, and from that point on, what we're going to do is we're going to be typing in the very same IP, or just by pasting it. What I like to do personally is adding an HTTP before it as well, just to make sure that it's actually going to detect it. And then last but not least, add those 2 dots. It's called a colon. I feel stupid. I kept thinking semicolon. Anyways, once you have that done, what you're going to be doing is you're going to press Control X, Y, and finally, it's going to ask you a file to write. Instead of doing anything else, we're going to hit the backspace on .example and write this to a .env. It's going to ask to save file under a different name. We're going to press Y. Now what that did essentially is it created the file as a new name. So we have our old document here. If we try to find 7000, it is still there. But if we go into our new document and we go to 7000, you'll see that our changes are made. Now, from this point on, this is where things kind of get questionable and harder for me to show you, primarily just because I have it already set up. However, let me show you how this is going to work. So after you finish this, all you have to do at this point is one command, and you have one more left. So you're going to type docker compose up -d -build. You press enter, it does everything for you from start to finish. It downloads all the dependencies, everything that you could possibly need from the very beginning. Now, it will take about 4 to 5 minutes, but then it will actually finish up and you'll be good to go. This is where people get really stuck at, especially inside YouTube videos, I noticed inside the comments section. The problem is that sometimes you're already using a Linux machine, or you're already having a bunch of different applications, or your Debian just doesn't want to work because it's being a jerk, okay? Sometimes it happens. One solution I found is instead of running that command, you can run this command, which is docker_build kit equals 0, docker compose up -d build. This will essentially ignore something that's within the Docker installation path, and it will just build for you flawlessly. I don't even remember what exactly it was, but I just typed that in once upon a time after asking a buddy, and it worked flawlessly. So don't ask me, kind of. If it builds, congratulations, you got it. Now, once you have it finished, it's going to look like green checks all the way down the list. So what we're going to do in this case is I'm going to show you very briefly what it's going to look like once you actually have it up and going. So in Odysseus, I'm going to docker compose -v, or yeah, it's going to stop all the containers and remove them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do docker up. So we're going to do docker compose up -. You'll see that it's creating everything from start to finish. Now, once you have this going and everything's created, it's ready to go, from that point on, what you can do is you can type something called docker compose logs. This will allow you essentially be able to see what's going on and what has to be typed or anything else of that nature to be able to actually use it. So we're going to type docker compose logs, and we're going to take a look here. We're able to actually read what's going on here. Now, typically, what can happen is you have to scroll up inside this Docker Compose log and find something that says password or temporary password is. And then from this point on, it says basically it's done. Log in with your existing admin credentials. Because I've already ran it, it's already going to have the login information, to which then I'm able to log in to my program. Now, after this point, you don't have to do anything else. If you run into problems, however, in the sense that you didn't get login credentials, but it's still saying that, then don't modify the environment file at all, like we did in the beginning, and try to just run it. Fully delete the folder. In order to delete the folder, so you know on how to do that, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna type rm, make sure you're inside the folder like we are, Odysseus, rm, space, -r, space, star. That deletes everything in the folder, essentially. And then from that point on, what you're going to do is you're going to then git pull again everything that's inside of that folder, and then redo it all from start to finish and bring it back up. Now, once you have that on, you're going to be able to finally log into your Odysseus. Now, you're going to go directly to the URL. So inside of here, you're going to go to your address. Now, unfortunately for me, I've already done this location, I have it open. But here's something that you should keep in mind as well. Sometimes you might not be able to get to this via your main computer, for example. So what you have to do is you have to make sure as well that the firewall is enabled and has a permission set, or is disabled, and from there you're fine. So we're just going to type in a different area or in the very same one. I just prefer to have separate commands for different terminals. Sudo ufw status. Ufw is United Firewall, essentially. We're going to type in our password and sudo's admin permissions. We'll see a bunch of different permissions going to and from the host, to which then you may have to set up a permission, which is then called sudo ufw allow 7000. This will then add a port that says this port number 7000 is allowed from anywhere, but you shouldn't have to do that. You'll be able to now freely be able to use Odysseus, and you'll have to log in right off the bat with your username, which is admin, and then the temporary password you found within the logs. Once you're inside of Odysseus, from that point on, if you click at the bottom left, there's a settings button. You can go to users, you can add new users, or you can actually just simply go to your account and change the current password, set it to a new password, set up to authentication, and basically go from there. Now, what I personally like to do is I like to change the theme by just clicking on the theme on the right hand side, choosing it to midnight. Now we're good to go. The next thing is, how do I get AI to be part of this now? Because I'm trying to do anything and it's just not working. It's like models missing, everything else. I have spent the last 2 days trying to understand how the fuck this works. And I think I've finally figured it out. So the cool part about video editing is that it doesn't look like it took 2 days, but it really took 2 days. You can see here at the bottom right, I now have a few of these models that are loading up. It took a long time. So, if you head into cookbook, you'll see that I have a lot of different instances, and I was going tooth and nail to figure this out. So for my own server, I don't have a graphics card. Because I don't have a graphics card, certain models just absolutely refuse to work for me. That's something you need to keep in mind, by the way. So I was like, okay, why don't I figure out how to make some work? Well, so I downloaded some models, but now here's the kicker. When you download models inside of Docker, it stays within Docker and it can be seen by Odysseus, which is absolutely wonderful. What they don't tell you is that when you're trying to launch something, like say for example Gemma, just as an example, you have to then choose a backend. This backend, I do not know how to put into words, is probably one of the most frustrating things I've come across. If you have a graphics card and it's wonderful and you love it very much, then hold on to it and treat it like another child, because it is extremely crucial. There's a GPU button that you have to specify which specific GPU that you plan to use here. In addition to this, you have to figure out what backend you're actually going to use. I have installed every single one of these, and the best one that I can say that seems to be correct is VLLM. But if you're like me, it doesn't have something like that, then your only source is Ollama. Now, in order to install Ollama, is you have to do the following command as soon as I can grab it. IRM https / you know, with colon and everything .com/install.ps1 with a bracket separation IEX. This is going to install Ollama and you won't have any problems normally. Now, here's the kicker. This is where I was getting super confused. If you go and try to install models through here, what you're going to end up having issues with is your Ollama is not going to be seeing anything. It's not going to detect any of your quins or your gemmas, nothing like that, because it's inside the Docker, whereas your Ollama is outside of the Docker. So what I have done, which I just suddenly realized, why don't you just install Ollama inside the Docker? I didn't think about that. Now I feel dumb. Hindsight's always 20/20. So be smarter than me and look at a quick guide on how to do that. But what I had to do essentially is figure out what I wanted to install by going over here, downloads, looking at the models, going to the HF link, and then from that point, when I wanted to use said model, then I would have to go to Ollama and I would have to copy this over. Now, when you copy this link, this is the Hugging Face website. At the top right, it says use this model. You click Ollama, you copy it over, and then all you do is you paste it inside of your virtual machines. Now, the other part of this is there's a whole other setup you have to do. So, when you go into settings, you have a add models section. This is the part that I just had no idea on. When you use this, you have to set up Ollama. Now, you can't just paste the endpoint here and think you're good to go with the localhost 11434 and it's going to work. For some reason, Ollama doesn't want to pick that up. What you have to do is you have to click the add Ollama and then hit add, because apparently you need the host.docker.internal part. Okay, makes sense. Sorry, I've gotten a little bit crazy with this. But anyways, when you add that, then it wants to work. From that point on, once you have Ollama installed, every time that you add in a new LLM into your system, it's going to appear here. It will only appear though once you refresh your screen. And there's another caveat to it. Because you have Ollama outside of your Docker, and what you have to do is you have to then modify its configuration, which is in, let me remember this, sudo systemctl edit Ollama. Once you get into this file, you'll see here, as I learned the hard way, anything between here and the comment below will become the new contents of the file. This line below this comment will be discarded. You have no idea how many times I did not read that comment, and I kept putting it in this list. On environment equals Ollama host, which is 0.0.0.0, because it's usually localhost 11434. You have no idea how many times I've done it. No idea. And I've used systemctl for a long time. So you have to put it above this line, environment equals Ollama host. Then what you have to do afterwards is sudo systemctl edit daemon reload, to which then after you have that, after you run that, sorry, then it should not have any issues whatsoever after that point. If, here we go again, you need to double check if it actually took your configurations, then you type ss space hyphen lntp with the separator rep 11434 or whatever port you have set up for Ollama. This will then tell you whether or not it's set to 0.0.0.0, which in this case it is, and speaking. If not, it will say something like localhost 11434, to which you know it did not take the parameter. Like I said, it has been a bit of hell for me to get this done. Once you have all this done, this is the next part that I had to learn the hard way. If you are running your own model, you have to decide whether or not you're going to have something chunky or small, because every time that you talk to this model and you tell it like, hi, how are you doing today, your CPU is just going to go acting like a race car, because it's using all the resources it has for that LLM straight at it. It doesn't have the knowledge of, oh, he simply told me hello, so I'm going to use 2% of my CPU. Nah. This motherfucker wants to use 100% for it. It goes balls to the wall, max out, to then just reply, hey, I'm doing pretty good today. How about you? So keep that in mind where you're using LLMs that are local. Now here's the other catch to this, okay? This program is really awesome. So when you actually have Quinn, when you have Gemma or anything else installed and you're actually doing your way, you have, for example, the brain, where it's going to start storing memories, your skills. You can add settings so it auto extracts from your conversations. You have the calendar, which is pretty good. I'm going to see if I can integrate it with Nextcloud, and then I'll do an entire video on that sort of stuff to try and actually integrate things, so it's not like you have to be inside the screen 24/7, but we'll see. But you have your calendar. You have comparisons on the parallels. Again, please, for the love of God, don't run two AIs unless your system can handle it, or you're going to explode your system. But if you have a ChatGPT model paired with a LLM and you want to compare it, you 100% can. It's probably what I'm going to be doing. So then I have a locally ran plus a cloud-based one, and then you're good to go. Now, if you want to add, for example, ChatGPT or DeepSeek or anything else like that, you have to go into the settings at the add models part and put in your API key that's down here at the bottom. From there on, you're basically good to go, and you'll have it appear just like you normally would inside the other bits. You have to remember that privacy matters. So for example, if you're putting a bunch of different prompts in, just because you're using Odysseus, ChatGPT, and everything else, they are still receiving your information. Furthermore, it could be worse than that. Because you think that you're having privacy, and so you're asking your local LLMs, hey, how do I do this? How do I do this? Here's some personal information that I normally wouldn't tell ChatGPT about, yada yada. When it goes into memory, such as the brain or anything like that, then when you're talking to, for example, ChatGPT, it's going to be using those memories to then cycle through and give you more detailed personal information with, for example, using ChatGPT. So, if, for example, you do with anything that's very private or business related, and then you ask ChatGPT or Gemini once again, then that information could possibly be used and sent over to their servers. The same thing, for example, if you're searching. If you're searching anything to do, if you're searching online and you're using LLMs that are on your own network and you're good to go, what can end up happening is certain LLMs might be scanning through the internet, being able to find whatever you want. Say you like, find me a potatoes recipe, and they stumble across the website that's malicious, and it's like the best potato recipes ever, and it's not smart enough to detect that it's a phishing website. The next thing you know, it's going to send you a link. Hey, here's so-and-so right here. You click on it, you're doomed. But anyways, my name's MatthewNapier. I just spent 3 days trying to figure out AI. It sucked.